Al Avila, he gone.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it was about a month and a half after I called for his head. The Tigers chose to allow him to run yet another amateur draft, as well as another trade deadline, which he has obviously failed 7 years in a row. He's failed his test, 2 tests every year, and he's failed each of them. I've questioned the timing of this. I was calling for his head. I think it was the beginning of June. I think it's I posted this on MajorLeagueAholes.com that he needed to be gone because I did not want him running another draft or a trade deadline. And it's a bit naive and irresponsible on this podcaster's part, but I can do that because that's what we do. Social media pundits, like irresponsible social media pundits like you and I, can say whatever the fuck I want. It's a little unrealistic that the Tigers would have fired him midway through the season, just weeks before the draft or the trade deadline. It's not like they were going to get their dream, replacement GM in that amount of time. But
right.
The idea, though, is just to have someone that has proven that he's been that incompetent for this many years to actually be at the helm for it. Another series of pivotal decisions for the franchise is why I wanted him out. Didn't have a candidate to replace him, obviously, but that's what I'm frustrated about right now, that you wonder about the timing. It was a week after, maybe a week and a half after the trade deadline officially, that he was relieved of his duties.
Yeah, it's quite, I mean, I agree with you 100%. It's questionable that, I mean, you gotta, if he's not there to do what little he did at the trade deadline, I guess,
running things.
Yeah, so. and he could have equally done what he did, right? I mean, are you happy with like the trade deadline?
I'm going to get into that. Actually, that's connected, but you're right. He was. Well, here, let me get back to the timing.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I think he was fired a week after the trade deadline because it happens to coincide with 2023 season ticket sales launching right now.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that interesting? All our teams launching 23 season tickets in all chaos.
Yeah, so I mean, that's the typical business cycle of baseball teams. This is when season tickets go on sale for the next season. So I think the Tigers marketing department and hopefully savvy ownership realized that the face of Al Avila would not be one that would sell tickets for 2023. So giving some kind of false hope. At least Avila's gone. There's no word on who potential candidates might be, other than reckless speculation, which I will definitely get into. But you mentioned that specifically the trade deadline, how the Tigers didn't do much, and that's going to be the theme of this show, where all of our teams did very little. I almost think the Tigers traded Michael Fulmer, who was on an expiring contract, but they had several
expected.
Yeah, absolutely. There were several relievers that could have been trade candidates, and it was even speculated that someone like Turk Skubal could have been traded, but fortunately he was not. Unfortunately, he's out for the season with an elbow issue. So I guess I don't know if that's a blessing or a curse, but here's my one of my conspiracy theories of the night. I think ownership told Al Avila he was gone, but he would still be allowed to run the trade deadline at least. But they kind of handcuffed him and said, you can only deal players with expiring contracts. You cannot make deals that could affect us, players that are under control for more than 1 year. We don't want to get rid of those, because you've shown no trade acumen in your entire career to make a good deal. So you can trade Fulmer, because he is an expiring contract, and that's not going to, what are we going to do? Might as well try to get something for him. Do not trade Gregory Soto, who you could argue would have been more valuable on the trade market. But he's under control for several years.
Yeah. So. I mean, if the idea is obviously they're going to compete sooner than later.
Jesus Christ, I hope
We,
it's sooner than
well,
later.
well, you know, that's the idea.
And,
We all know ideas don't always play
yeah.
out. Listen to
Well,
Sox type thing, but like you want Soto around.
yeah, you want a competent general manager to have all the tools, all the resources available to him. Anything the Tigers have of value, you don't want someone that doesn't know what they're doing trading those away for
Right.
potentially pennies on the dollar. So that's at least my conspiracy theory. I don't, it's just odd that it's 1 week after the trade deadline that he's let go for several reasons, but I think they're, and the fact that they did very little, even though Al, 2 weeks before the deadline said, we're open for business. Anything's on the table. And that's where
Right.
Scooble was even mentioned. And that's where I was completely crestfallen. The idea that we'd have to give up on one of the few shining health at that point, uh, healthy young pitchers that we had. Of course, that has gone to shit subsequently,
But with that, the problem with that was, and you and I talked about it, a few weeks back, was when someone like Scooble's name goes on the table, then you're talking about starting over a rebuild.
yeah,
and then
100.
yeah. So at least, like you said, like not that it, elbow injury. Okay, is he having Tommy John or?
I've not seen that.
Yeah, but
yeah, it's not good, whatever. But
yeah,
regardless, I mean, I don't know. I just feel like his hands were tied, and I think that came from ownership down because just the timing of everything. So, well, the obvious next question is who would replace Al Avila, and there's been plenty of speculation about that. The dumbest and most obvious names you hear are Theo Epstein or Jeffrey Lunau. I mean, Theo Epstein has no interest in. I don't think he has any interest in managing in the general manager for any team, president, general manager, whatever title you give him for any team, let alone the Tigers.
He's doing good. He's doing all right.
He's fine.
He's loving life.
He's proven himself beyond the shadow of a doubt. He does not need to prove himself anymore. Maybe you'd like the challenge is the only thing you could hope for. He wants to be an owner. He's going to be part of an ownership group at some point. That's his next move. He's working with Major League Baseball's main office, trying to reshape the game right now into a more positive product. He's got much larger goals, I think, than being a general manager / president of any team, let alone the Tigers. I think that's foolish. But hey, I mean, Chris Ilitch needs to at least make a phone call, see if it's possible. Jeffrey Lunau, of course, the disgraced former president GM of the Astros, who lost his job because of the cheating scandals out there. Obviously, he's probably made a scapegoat in ways similar to AJ Hinch. He may not even been aware of what was going on. He certainly has built an impressive franchise that has been taken over by others subsequently, but I feel that's a bit unrealistic. There's a little too much Astros stink to that. Having the manager who was let go and the GM who was let go from that organization running the Tigers, it seems a little too much almost. I do think AJ Hinch is going to have an influence on who will be the next GM for the Tigers. Which is kind of strange to think about, to have your manager being in a position where he can, help pick his own boss. But I think he has that kind of clout in the organization. And there really isn't much else that the organization has to hang their hat on. I think there could be a connection. Maybe there's somebody there. I've seen lists, that talk about different assistant GMs with the Astros that might be perfect candidates. I've seen essentially the Athletic wrote an article about basically every successful organization, every one of their assistant GMs could be a candidate, which is fun to write about and speculate about. I'm not going to waste everyone's time going through each of those, but I'd love to have somebody in a forward-thinking organization come to the Tigers to take the reins. Somebody from the Rays, somebody from the Dodgers, somebody from the Astros if it has to be. Those kind of teams. I don't know. Nobody really knows who the perfect GM candidate is, but
Miguel Cabrera.
it's fun to speculate about. The first person and the actual photograph for that feature article I referenced and the Athletic mentioned Jason McLeod, which sent shivers down my spine.
Shiver me timbers.
Formerly of the Cubs organization, who was essentially scapegoated or to blame for their failure, as he was running their drafts for the majority of the Theo and company era. And that has been their failure, other than drafting at the top, top of the draft to get, such players as Chris Bryant, which probably, he actually fell into their lap because Mark Appel got drafted by the Astros #1 overall. But, he was not able to draft any pitchers. And that is why essentially Theo failed on his promise to build a platform for sustained success. McLeod was removed from those duties.
Excuse me, 1 second. I just have to make a correction.
Okay.
He did draft one really good pitcher. His name was Dylan Cease.
Okay.
That's all I knew.
It was going to be some fucking snarky comment. You're right. You're cracking yourself up over there.
I'm dying over here.
Yeah.
After being at a 21-5 loss, I gotta make jokes.
Yeah. I understand. I'll give you some leeway, but
thanks, buddy.
McLeod was removed from those duties. He no longer ran the draft. I forget what position they put him in. And then he was removed from the organization. He's currently a special assistant with the Arizona Diamondbacks, which means he can chime in on conversations, I guess. But I don't know what kind of official responsibilities he has with that mediocre organization. So I would be against Jason McLeod, I guess. That is the
I understand.
idea here.
I mean, I remember us talking about how McLeod was demoted and all that. And that was sort of, that was towards the end of Theo leaving, right?
It was. I think it was in probably 2019. Yeah. I think they called it a lateral move, but he definitely lost his draft responsibilities, which kind of a big deal. I forget what I think they put him in charge of minor league player development or whatever title they gave him. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but it was certainly a demotion. And then obviously it doesn't even work for the organization anymore. So whatever, take that as you will. But I was kind of disturbed at his photograph, and he was the first one mentioned in that Athletic article, which is a media outlet that I respect immensely. So
I know. So that worries you, right?
I am worried for sure. But, again, you can talk about GMs, recklessly speculate who it could be or who would be the best at it. Nobody fucking knows. I guess the one idea that I really didn't like besides Jason McLeod would be the Tigers promoting somebody from within.
No, you got to go outside.
Well, they've made some young hires recently in the front office, after Al finally decided they needed to have an analytics department 5 years ago. 20 years after everyone else was starting to build their departments. But there are younger candidates that don't necessarily have the same stink that they're not necessarily proteges of Al Avila, but they were brought in by him. But I would find that disturbing. I wouldn't be real fired up about that. It would kind of tie into why they didn't make big moves at the trade deadline, though, too. I was thinking potentially, they are just going to, I hope not, but maybe promote from within. They didn't want to make any big moves, but they knew they were getting rid of Al, and, they're just going to let somebody else step in. But at the same time, they could have announced that hiring already if that's what they were going to do, or that promotion from within, if that's what they were going to do. So,
right.
I think that's probably off the table, and that will make me feel much better. But again, it's going to be, it'll be the off season before we find out. Texas just fired their manager and their president this week. I don't know if he would be the right candidate, but there's going to be openings all over the place. But now there is competition, at least now. I don't know if Texas is a better job than They had Detroit. They do have a lot of assets, but they also have a lot of liabilities considering the money they're paying.
Oh God.
They spent a $250 million, more than a quarter, maybe a $500 million this past offseason. Draft basically signing every one of the big name shortstops, putting them in different positions. The Marcus Semien and what's his fuck from the Dodgers, but yeah. So that, I guess that's the one thing that the Tigers are, they wanted to move on sooner than later to kind of get ahead of things, but now there is already competition in the market. The best candidates are going to decide whether they would like to be in Detroit or in Texas now, and probably going to be more to come. So
Word Hole Media.